Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Haverford Township Board of Commissioners regular meeting agenda for Monday, November the 9th. I'd like to announce that prior to this meeting, the board met in executive session to discuss legal, personnel, and real estate issues. Mr. Berman, would you please call the roll?
Mr. D'Amelio.
Here.
Mr. Oliva.
Here.
Mr. McCluskey.
Here.
Mr. Siegel. Mr. Siegel is here. I just can't hear him right now, but I have him on. There he is.
I can
Very
see
good.
him.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Quinn.
Here.
Dr. Hart.
Here.
Mr. Holmes.
Here.
Mr. Wexler.
Here. I'd ask all to please stand and join our Chief of Police, John Viola, in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our first order of business, we have two proclamations. First one is celebrate the 100-year anniversary, 100-year birthday milestone. I believe Mr. Siegel, are you reading that?
Brian, bigger than life.
If not, we'll. Somebody's not muted on there.
There we go. Mr. Siegel, if you're present, would you like to read that proclamation?
Yes, ask them to mute too.
I'll do that. And I would ask anybody who's participating via Zoom if you could please pause your speakers or your microphones.
Except for Mr. Siegel.
Except for Mr. Siegel, who is having technical difficulties apparently.
There we go.
Oh, very good.
I got it. Sorry.
Thank you.
Straightened out now. All right. May I?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is honoring a resident of the Quadrangle, Mr. Howard Fenner. This proclamation honors his 100th birthday, and I will read it, and then we will be able to have it delivered to him. Whereas the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Haverford, County of Delaware, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, takes great pleasure in recognizing significant milestones in the lives of individuals residing in the community. And whereas Howard Fenner was born October 14, 1920 in Philadelphia and has reached his 100-year birthday milestone. Whereas he and his wife Marjorie were married for 71 years and moved to Haverford in 2003. He's the proud father of 4 children, 6 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren, and a good friend to many neighbors at the Quadrangle. Howard served in the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, a precursor to the CIA during World War II, and was primarily stationed in China. He earned an electrical engineering degree from the Cooper Union in New York City and worked into his late 70s. He is a patent holder who enjoys analyzing, redesigning, and improving electronics, reading, and being a philosopher. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Haverford, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, offer our deepest congratulations to Howard Fenner and wish him continued health and happiness. Proclaimed this 14th day of October 2020. Board of Commissioners, Bill Wexler, President. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great milestone. Maybe we could get the movie rights to his life since he was in the OSS and have a great Netflix movie here to benefit the township. Our second proclamation will be presented by Commissioner McCluskey to honor Small Business Saturday. Commissioner McCluskey is our liaison to the Haverford Economic Development.
Whereas the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Haverford, County of Delaware, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania celebrates our local small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 30.7 million small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all firms who paid employees in the United States, are responsible for 64.9 of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2018, and whereas small businesses employ 47.3% of employees in the private sector in the United States, 62% of U.S. small businesses reported that they need to see consumer spending return to pre-COVID levels by the end of 2020. In order to stay in business, 65% of U.S. small business owners said it would be most helpful to their businesses to have regulars return and start making purchases again, and 3/4 of U.S. consumers are currently looking for ways to shop small and support their community. And whereas 96% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, agree that shopping at small, independently owned businesses support their commitment to making purchases that have positive social, economic, and environmental impact. And 97% of consumers who shop on Small Business Saturday agree that small businesses are essential to their community. And whereas 95% of consumers who shopped on Small Business Saturday reported the day makes them want to shop or eat at small, independently owned businesses all year long, not just during the holiday season. And whereas Haverford Township and our partner, Haverford Partnership for Economic Development, support our local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas HBT is organizing special promotions, activities, and the sale of new Discover Haverford Keep It Local gift cards on the Saturday after Thanksgiving, and Haverford Township will be offering free parking throughout the day. And now therefore, the Board of Commissioners of the Township of Haverford do hereby declare and proclaim November 28, 2020 as H-Town Holidays Shop Local Day, and urge the residents of our community and communities across the country to support small businesses and merchants that day and throughout the year. Proclaim this 9th day of November 2020, Township of Haverford. William Wexler, President.
Thank you. We hope by highlighting that is Small Business Saturday that all our residents will endeavor to shop in our town and keep our residents and our businesses vibrant and alive. We greatly appreciate your efforts to help that. Our next item of business, Police Department, the appointment of an entry-level police officer. I'd ask Mrs. Pacello, the chair of our Civil Service Commission, to approach with our Chief of Police.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Thank you. Good evening to you as well.
We still have one vacancy in our police department, but I'll be reading from our previous certified list, which was approved in December of 2019. I'm going to read 3 names, any of which the board can nominate, and then engage in a formal vote. We have Randall Kennedy, Sean McLaughlin, James Williams.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Sean McLaughlin.
Second?
Motion made and seconded for Mr. Sean McLaughlin to be appointed as a Haverford Township Entry Police Officer. Please call the roll.
Mr. DeMilio,
Mr. McLaughlin.
Mr. Oliva,
Mr. McLaughlin.
Mr. McCluskey,
McLaughlin.
Mr. Siegel,
Mr. McLaughlin.
Mr. Lewis,
Mr. McLaughlin.
Mr. Quinn,
Sean McLaughlin.
Dr. Hart,
Mr. McLaughlin.
Mr. Holmes, Mr. Wexler.
Mr. McLaughlin. Congratulations, Mr. Sean McLaughlin. Welcome to Haverford Township.
Thank you again, Commissioners. Hopefully, we'll start this testing process again next year with some different standards. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item, any Commissioner Committee update? Mr. Hart?
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to bring you way back in time, before wearing masks and social distancing elbow handshakes, all the way back to March 9th, which was our last meeting before COVID hit and we became virtual. And at that meeting, we're going to have a vote on whether to demolish the Brookline School in the event that the library was not going to be built in the Brookline School. And we ended up tabling it. A number of us had residents who felt that this was a treasure that was something that the township could make use of, that there were approaches to renovating it. And what we did from there was form a subcommittee. It included myself, Commissioner Oliva, and Commissioner Quinn, and we met monthly beginning in June with some representatives from the Historical Commission, neighborhood residents, and discussed possibilities of what we could do with the school, with the building. Next one. So again, the reason people feel strongly about it, the Brookline School was built in 1913. It was designed by a pretty well-known architect, David Knickerbocker Boyd, who designed a lot of buildings in this area, over 3,000 buildings in this area. Brookline School is an example of a school from the progressive era, and it meets the eligibility requirements for a listing in the National Register and Haverford Township Historic Resource Survey. Next one. So we looked at 3 different options. First option was that the township would renovate the building. And we had received, Ms. Benoni had given us an estimate that it would cost approximately $10 million to bring the building back to standard. And we looked at, there are a number of possibilities of what could go there. We mostly focused on a return for the senior center and also as a daycare center. Other residents have suggested turning it into a community center, to have studios in it, to have workspaces, and a lot of these services. Certainly good ideas. I think we felt that we were just going to focus on those 2 possibilities, in that it would not be a change for the neighborhood. It wouldn't involve more parking than already had been existing. So we looked at it. The cost to the township, if we were to borrow the $10 million, our debt service would be $525,000 a year. We'd have additional costs in utilities and upkeep. The previous rental fees from the senior center and the daycare was about $75,000 a year. So the pros to this is that the township would have control of the facility for important community services. Obviously, the downside is that it's a significant cost to the township, one which we do not currently provide. Next slide. Another possible option 2 was to look to see if there were nonprofit providers who might want to work with us on the rehabilitation. Previously, the Surrey Center, Bob Madonna, who was the head of the Surrey Center at the time, had approached the township and said, this was a possibility, maybe they could invest. Bob subsequently retired. I reached out to the Surrey Services during the summer. They continue to be very interested in returning to the Brookline building should we renovate it, but they felt they did not have funds to put into the renovation. We've had some difficulty. We're going to reach out to the YMCA. We never really got any feedback. So again, a pro if we would have kept important services in the township, but there was nobody else that's going to pay for this at this point. And so we went to option number 3, which would be a private developer. One of the members of our task force is an architect who has worked with developers, mostly in Philadelphia, who have redeveloped schools into housing. And we had no idea, we wanted to get a sense of whether or not the building would be suitable, if people would be interested in it. So we arranged for them to come to take a look at it. And we gave them proviso that the park would stay as it is, and that anything that went there, any type of housing, all the parking needed to be on site, that we were not going to have parking, off-site parking. This group was extremely enthusiastic about it. They felt it would make a very attractive site for conversion to apartments. They did not see any problems with preserving the park or with providing on-site parking. In their case, they were thinking of market rate apartments. They felt they could put 30 apartments into the building. We would not be committing to doing that, but that was what they were interested in. So again, the pros here, it's a potential income for the township from the sale of the school. There's ongoing tax revenue to the township. Could make these apartments age restricted. When we were starting the comprehensive plan and we had the community outreach in regards to what type of housing people felt they need, one of the things was senior housing. Certainly as we're seeing prices in the township for housing go up, which is a good thing if you're going to sell, but it's a tough thing if you want to downsize. This would be a possibility for seniors who wanted to downsize but stay in the community. We'd be preserving all the parkland and preserving a historic resource. Not necessarily a con, but there would be a couple of steps that would need to be taken here. We would need to go back to the school district to seek their approval. Because this was not something we had agreed to. And ultimately, it would require a zoning change. The current zoning map would not allow for housing at the site. And the final one. So the next steps would be, if we were to proceed, would be number one, to go back to the school district and see if they were willing to have us pursue this. And then would be issuing a clearly defined request for proposals for the site. We could specify that we wanted senior housing. We could leave it more open. We could specify that we wanted to have some of the space not available as a senior center. All those things would affect cost, but it would be an alternative to taking the school down. I'll leave it open to. Yeah, come on up.
Yes, you.
What we've done in Lanark, we have this very same issue with the Lanark school, and a school built at the same time by and we've turned that into, I haven't, the developer, Jeff Steigerwald, has turned it into an apartment building, which is in that neighborhood. I don't know if you know Lanark, that side of Lanark, very big old homes with elderly people, a lot of elderly people living there, and they have no place to go. They want to stay in Lanark, but they don't want to live in a 4,000, 3,000 square foot home. And so this allows them to stay in the community and still, get the bus and be around their friends and that sort of stuff. So this is, I think it's a great idea. We're able to save the building and fill a void, a vacuum in the community where senior housing is as a premium here, because we have a lot of
older people living in the community in these homes, and as they move out, you know, life changes, and now they need a place to go. So this development of this property, we're able to save a, you know, beautiful building in Brookline that's been part of the community for 100 years, and then provide tax base for the township and a service to the community. Do you have anything?
Well, I agree with what you said. I think that I think that that's a great, a great idea. And well, over by you in Ward 2, you don't see that many cars in that place, so it's not going to affect the area, the area around there as much as it would with other things. So I think that's a great plan.
How many apartments in Lanark versus
There are 13 in that building.
in this one?
I think it's 20 total. There's seven, I'm sorry. There are 20 total. 7 are two-bedroom and 13 are single-bedroom. So there's 20 with, I think, 23 spots. But with senior living, people don't have 2 cars, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of,
And the building's fully
yeah,
occupied?
there's really no impact to the
And
community.
the building's occupied already? It's already fully
The
occupied?
building is, I believe, they've opened the building, yes. I believe so. I believe they started renting either this month or they're very close.
Did the developers you spoke to, did they think apartments are a better use than outright sale, a condominium kind of approach? Are they?
Again, when we met with them, we tried to make it clear that we weren't making an offer to them. So their just impression was, this would be great.
Something's doable.
We would be looking at apartments, and not condominiums.
I do think, I've asked that question.
Because you'd have less transient.
Yeah, the price that they'd have to sell the condos for would be prohibitive. In that area, you know, you'd have to get $400,000 for each unit, or
You'd have to get more than
something
that
around
because
there
you
to
got
make it
10
work.
million in renovations.
What's that?
You'd have to get more than that because you got 10 million and before you even,
Right, exactly. So
before you
have
do
a-
anything. So
yeah.
you got a long payback period.
So it would be cost prohibitive, but it works out with being able to.
10 million, bring it up to code.
That's what I mean. So
Individual kitchens,
you're not going to sell 30 units for 400.
Yeah, there is,
that's $2
the
million.
one in Lanark has individual kitchens, the washer, dryer, heating and air conditioning units, everything is self-contained in one unit. That's what the way they had to build it for, because that, you know, it's an old building and they can't have one heating system. It's not like they're building it new, so. But it works, it really does.
Mr. President, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Mr. D'Amelio?
I assume that when they renovated, they would put an elevator in, correct?
Yes, they would have to.
And why do we need approval from the school district? Can we clarify that?
Because when we,
When we purchased it, those were the.
when we purchased, the purchase agreement were that we
Yeah.
were going to use it for a community use. So this would be
Sort of
sort of stretching it.
stretching it, but it is community use.
Yeah, 60 residential units. That's stretching it.
I would think you
Not
could work
60,
something.
30.
I would think you
30
could.
residential units.
I said 60, 30 apartments.
I would think you could work something out with them as long as they were sharing in the upside.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about whether or not to go to the school district first, that I felt like we should get some sense of the board here before we did that. And there's no, I mean, what you would be doing from here is saying to the school district, is this okay? And then putting out a request for proposals. At the end of the day, we could say this doesn't work. And we could still go back to
Because any
taking the
proposal would
building
have to
down.
be conditional upon them getting zoning approval for
Right.
putting 30 multi-dwelling transient units in a highly residential neighborhood.
I think this is a good idea. I think you guys did a great job with this.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, thank you
I
for
don't, I
your
don't, I don't mean
efforts.
to be, I don't mean to be negative, but, I mean,
Well, you don't have to be.
I don't have to be. I'm not trying to be. I'm not trying to be. I just,
If to make positive comment, you're gonna go negative.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I think there was a large pushback initially to this being a commercially developed property, which is part of the reason why the school district was willing to give it to us for nothing. And, you know, I mean, I recognize that the planning that you've all done here was to save the building. But you know, we're not considering, this presentation doesn't include the options for that space that we discussed for the better part of a year that don't involve saving the building, right?
Yeah, just to, I mean, I guess to clarify my position, I don't know if at the end of the day, if we did this, that I'm, which way I would vote on things. But I also, I think at this point, we're seeing a possible viable option. There's no pressure to do something right away. We could certainly take the next steps and say, at the end of that, say, oh, this is great, or no, but, you know, this is not going to work.
That's the way I feel too, that we had to look at all ideas before tearing it down, if that's what we do.
Yeah. The idea is not to make it a commercially developed property and not to bring in more traffic. You're bringing in less traffic than it would be with the senior center and the
I'm less
a
concerned.
daycare.
I know parking and traffic
And you're
is
filling a
100%
need in
of
the
our job.
neighborhood for, you're filling a need in the neighborhood for senior living, where, you know, it's not gonna be a commercially developed property. It will be, you know, residential property.
Yeah, I mean, senior living is commercial. I mean, those entities would only do it to make money. Again, I'm not trying to be difficult. I just, if we're considering this, I think there has to be the option that whatever we would do with it if the building came down. Is all I'm saying.
I didn't hear the last part of that.
What we would do with it if the building came down, if we did not save the building.
Right, actually, I totally agree. I think
Right.
that if we were going to do this route, I would also go to Brian, to go to the Parks Department and say, give us a plan, what you would do with the whole,
Right, exactly.
and that we would be then, at the end of that, looking at a proposal that would come from this, as well as a Parks proposal, and could get some sense of what we could do. Because, I mean, at this point, we're also would be talking about taking the building down without really knowing what the park would entail, so.
Okay.
To me, there seems to be just two options. The first, you mean the option, the idea of leasing this property out to, you know, 5 or 6 different tenants and generating $70,000 of income on a probably, you know, $10 million just to get it up to code, and then another $3 or $4 million makes absolutely zero sense in my mind. So it's either the option of developing it for commercial use like a condominium or apartments, or, as Mr. McCluskey said, I mean, make it open space.
Yeah.
I think they're the two decisions. I mean, that's my personal view, is one of those two.
And I think that's where we are. I mean,
Yeah.
of these,
Exactly.
of what we looked at, we felt this was the only viable option for,
Exactly.
This is the
maintaining the
viable
building.
option for saving the building.
Right.
Exactly.
Now, whether
If
that
you're
is the
looking to
best
save
option for the site, I
Right.
don't know.
Exactly. If you're
Yeah.
looking to save the building, this is
This is
would
the
be
only thing.
best way to do it. If, you know, and then on the other side of that thing, what's a recreation gonna look like? What's that plan look like? And then we make a decision based on that.
I mean, I mean, it's early on. I mean, I got a lot of questions about the legality of age restriction and all that kind of stuff that you really can't do that anymore.
That's ultimately gonna be up to the developer though, right? I mean, the developer's gonna decide on
Yeah,
what the
it's, I mean,
best,
it's
the highest
getting
and best
tougher and
uses.
tougher to put in a residential neighborhood.
Yeah.
You know, we could end up with 30 families that want their kids to go to Haverford School, you know, in there, so.
I would just, I mean, we obviously don't have
No.
all the information, so I'm not saying it, but I would have concerns, as Andy said, that an actual developer, I mean, senior living sounds great, but people who do senior living are trying to make money. Like, they're not
yeah.
Surrey, you know,
They're gonna
so
use-
if a developer was gonna come in here and actually do apartments that would turn a profit at some point, I don't think they'd be cheap.
No, they're not
Oh,
gonna.
no.
Couldn't be.
The apartments over in Lanark are not,
They're not cheap.
they're
Right,
not,
so
you know,
yeah, I just,
like rent control or anything like that. Those are.
But they're
they're
restricted to
beautiful.
senior citizens, I guess, is that?
Yeah, it's, I mean, when you're living in a.
I don't
when you're-
think that's,
Okay.
that's any age over there.
Okay.
But when you're living in Lanark and you sell your house and you get, I'm sorry. When you're living in Lanark and you get, you're getting $500,000 for a house, you can afford an apartment at that price. So that's all,
So just so I.
You're talking about-
Is that property age restricted now?
that property is not age restricted. It is not.
Okay. And again, I'm not trying to be negative. You
But that
guys
was-
did, you guys
that-
did a great job. This is what we.
I mean, there's,
That property was a little different in it was a commercial property already, and they bought it without, it wasn't a property that belonged to the township or an old school or anything. That was a commercial property, and they could do with it whatever they want. This would be a little different in the fact that, we own it, and,
I think it was
and we would
institutional
be-
before. They had to get a zoning.
what's that?
It was institutional because it was a school, right?
Correct,
They had to get a change to make it residential,
correct,
right?
yeah. But it wasn't in our hands. It's not like we could knock it down or anything. This belonged to somebody.
Right, it was owned by the Friends.
It's up to them to do that. Here, we can knock it down and put, increase whatever plan works for us is, but we were tasked with bringing this.
No, yeah, I understand.
And
Great job.
I believe we did that.
So do you need a sense of the board, or what do you?
Well, I think there's,
I mean, I think it's a
we should
discussion.
talk
We'll have to have at a work session to go through it in
Okay.
detail.
Yeah.
And we can, in the interim, reach out to the school district and get their feedback.
I think that'd be appropriate for Mr.
Yeah,
Berman to do with
we need to have,
Dr. Rushi.
recreation.
I can
weigh
talk to
in
their president.
on what it would be and what it would look like, how much it would cost to
Yep.
redo that, and what those benefits would be prior to putting this in front of everybody.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Any other commissioner committee updates?
Mr. President, just remind everybody that next Monday is our first scheduled budget hearing.
Correct. From the Finance Committee. Thank you very much.
Of the Finance Committee.
Police Department, crime update. Chief of Police?
I know.
The Police Department monthly report for October, 22 criminal arrests, 84 traffic citations, 14 non-traffic, 75 written warnings, 146 parking tickets issued. Aggravated assault, also in Sagamore. Turned out that a victim reported he was attacked by a Hispanic male in the street dislocation, but is very vague in what his description was. He would not cooperate with the investigation. So video was observed from the residents, didn't show the incident at all, so we feel it didn't even happen here. Unit Block of Holbrook responded to the residents for a report of subject to lacerations of his hands, reports that his brother attacked him with a samurai sword. No charges brought against the brother. 200 block of East County Line Road, I think you're all aware of this, but I'll read this. Police responded to the Palambero Club at this location for a shooting. This happened on 10/22 at 3:21 in the afternoon. Police located the victim in the rear lot outside the back door with several gunshots to the groin area. Victim was transferred to Lankerville Hospital where he was treated and then released the following day. The details of the incident are as follows. There was a funeral memorial service being held at the hall when an altercation started between two family members. During the altercation, another family member approached the fight and fired several shots at the victim, striking him in the groin. Haverford detective units, along with Delaware County CID and Lower Merion, helped on investigating the incident. The shooter has been identified and an arrest warrant has been obtained. The shooter is also on federal probation as well, so the U.S. Marshals Service also has a warrant for him and is actively looking for the suspect. We had a sex offense in the 1600 block Caracon Drive, consensual activity, and we are still investigating this with one of them complaining that one was forced upon the other without going into any more detail. Motor vehicle thefts, unit block of Golfview Road. Toyota was parked in the street. Key fob was left in the vehicle. 500 block of Lancaster Avenue, Wilkie Alexis. someone misrepresented himself and with a fraudulent check and took the vehicle. And then we had 2 East Township line U-Haul, a truck had not been returned. Once again, we have 22 attempts from autos or thefts from autos. 300 block of Bewley Road, 100 block of Land Ave, 1300 block of Lawrence, 1900 block of Westchester Pike, 100 block of Flintlock, unit block of Meadowbrook, Foster Avenue, Belmont Avenue, Maryland Avenue, Dorchester, 700 block of Howard. On the Dorchester, we have Nest camera footage of the 2 suspects, excuse me. The video was poor in quality and grainy, but documented at the time at 3:46 in the morning. 700 block of Warren, 200 block of Ivy Rock, 1300 block of Annabella, another one, 1300 block of Annabella, 300 block of North Eagle, 200 block of Ivy Rock, 900 block of Larchmont, 100 block of Upland, Sycamore, Garfield, 2 on Garfield, and 1200 block, and 600 block of Grand. Once again, excuse me, most of the vehicles were unlocked with minor things taken out, change and things like that. But it's just, people have to keep their cars locked, and we're not the only ones suffering from this. Remember, it dipped dramatically over the past 3 months, and it shot through the roof again. Towns have made arrests, we have made arrests, but it continues. We had 7 bicycle thefts. We feel that's part of the cars being gone through, and we have 4 canine usages. Excuse me, that's my report.
John, can I ask you a question? Sounds like it was a coordinated attack, if you will, on the township with all these car break-ins. Do you think it's connected to that gang you talked about? Is this?
No, it's not.
This can't be all separate, right?
No, it is, believe it or not, it is separate. I don't know what, it's beyond description sometimes, because we have videos of different people, whereas sometimes something will pop up and it'll be a wanted person from other towns that has been wandering through different townships doing the same thing. And there's some warrants out for some of these people, but a lot of them are just, they come up in the middle of the night and just start walking through cars. And we have the videos, you can see them walking down the street. All they do is walk up and down the drives and just flip the door handles. Cars open, they go inside, or if there's a key fob in there, they drive the car away and it's discovered next town over, the same thing happens over there.
Yeah, and they're walking up the driveways too.
Yes,
'Cause at
yes,
the
that's
1200
correct.
block of Garfield, which is they walked up the driveway and tried the handles
Yes.
on the cars and left the doors open on my neighbor's car.
Yeah, this goes through them very quickly. I leave them open, sometimes they close them, but it's been a real problem for well over a year now. And that, when I talked about the gang we have talked about before, they normally target the areas, dog parks, recreation areas and things like that, where people leave their bags in the car. While they're out the recreation, they break the window and take the bag.
Well, I would encourage anyone who has additional video.
Yes.
To please send it to the township.
And when this happens, we usually go knocking on doors to see who does have video and get as much as we can.
Some of these Ring cameras are pretty good.
Yes, they are.
Depending if the lighting is good.
Yes, we come up with some really good videos sometimes, but most of them are wearing hoodies and masks, and there's very little to see. And we even try with fingerprints. A lot of them are smudges, and you don't get too much out of them unless you're a wanted person.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Chief. Next item is the Township Auditor update.
I reviewed the expenditures and warrants for this meeting. I found no irregularities, and all my questions were answered to my satisfaction. And also in regards to no irregularities, the first place Eagles were off this past weekend, so that was a lot less stress.
Thank you.
3, 4, and 1 first.
Great, right?
Our next item is the Citizens Forum. We have one registered speaker, Mr. Berman, that we have. I will read the letter to the Board of Commissioners regarding the library. Gentlemen, if there is such a thing as making a hasty decision after 6 years, I believe the vote to renovate the existing library rather than build a new library at the Brookline School site qualifies. I disagree with Mr. McCluskey's statement at the September meeting. The board has performed their due diligence for the following reasons. 1, absence of an acceptable solution to the parking problem at the existing library. This should have been resolved before making a final decision on whether a renovated or new library will be built. Number two, lack of discussion among the board and with township residents about the ramifications providing adequate parking at the renovated library will have on the surrounding neighborhoods. Number three, summarily rejecting without any further study any alternate plans for the Brookline School site. Despite what the township engineer said at the September 14th, 2020 meeting, the spreadsheet prepared by the architect does not show an apples-to-apples comparison of the options. The additional required parking and off-site improvement costs were not included in the renovation estimate, and the proposed new building is 4,700 square feet, or 15% larger than the renovated library. At this point, you have voted for a library that is both smaller than what the library board would like and still has woefully inadequate parking. Strongly advocating for 8th Ward residents at the September 14th, 2020 meeting, Mr. McCluskey stated, quote, "At various points, various members of this board made promises to that neighborhood that the field would not be touched," end quote. And Mr. Oliva stated that he doesn't want any part of reconfiguring that field, and he wants it to remain exactly the way it is. In regards to renovating the library, Mr. Lewis stated, by the library's neighbor's property to solve the parking problem. Purchasing property around the existing library was also brought up at the February 4th, 2020 work session. As far as I know, no commissioner has advocated for the neighborhoods around the existing library. In order to provide the additional 53 parking spaces needed, the entire west library side of Greenway Road would need to be converted into a parking lot. This means 4 families would be displaced, their homes demolished, and many mature trees cut down, resulting in decreased values of surrounding properties and the fabric of a neighborhood destroyed. I don't believe the board feels that one area of the township is more important or valuable than another. However, residents of the neighborhoods surrounding the library should have the same opportunity to express their opinions about the potential parking situation as the residents of the neighborhoods surrounding the Brookline School had about the use of the site. While I strongly disagree with the new construction square foot cost used, parentheses, which are 25% higher than the national average in the spreadsheet, I will use them for the building costs presented below. I have spent most of my career as a commercial building estimator, specializing in the type of conceptual estimates that were the basis of the cost presented in the architect's spreadsheet. At the September 14th Commissioners' meeting, Mr. Goldsmith stated that he wants to look at a building off the second floor of the existing library. To add a third floor would cost $11,125,000, including FFE and soft cost, and removing and replacing the existing elevator due to the added floor. The estimated cost to build a parking lot next to the existing library is $2.4 million, including a 10% construction contingency. This estimate includes buying and demolishing the 4 houses, removing the trees, removing and replacing sidewalks and curbs, and landscaping and lighting for the new lot. Adding the above costs to those presented at the February 24th meeting results in a new project total cost for the renovated library of $24,897,000. As a comparison, the project total presented at the February 24th meeting for a new library at the Brookline School site was $29,351,000. An alternate, simpler design, similar to the one presented by Mr. Siegel at the September 14th meeting, but providing the required parking while maintaining the size of the existing field, would certainly lower this cost into the same range as the 3-story renovation with the required parking option. It would be a disservice to the taxpayers if other options at the Brookline School site are not explored if the addition of a 3rd floor to the existing library is being considered. As part of this discussion at the February 24th work session, it was stated that the library board may be willing to compromise on the number of parking spaces at the renovated building. If this is consideration, why not reconsider Mr. Siegel's alternate plan and limit the number of spaces to those that do not encroach on the existing field? If anything other than the demolition of the Brookline School is being considered, the following costs should be added to the above renovated library new project total cost to get an accurate comparison with the new library cost. $10 million quoted at the 9/3/19 meeting to bring the building up to code and $6 million for interior renovations. My estimate mailed to Mr. Siegel and Dr. Hart on 11/1/19. This would bring the project total cost for the renovated library to $40,897,000. Two other options that I do not think have been discussed are, number one, for the new library, the township can give the architect a budget that needs to be designed to. Number two, for the parking, build a lot using grass pavers or another type of permeable paving to help with the, quote, greening of the township on the site to be demolished, on the to be demolished Brookline School, and provide a shuttle to and from the renovated library. I appreciate that this has been a long and arduous process, but it is imperative that a final decision needs to be made that's in the best interest of all the township's residents and taxpayers. Please present all the options and the respective estimated costs for public review, get feedback, and then make a fully informed decision. I would be pleased to discuss how I calculate the cost presented here or anything else in this letter with any commissioner at their convenience. Please email me below for my phone number. Thank you, Mr. J. Prosak, 265 Ellis Road. And we have no other registered speakers then.
No other registered speakers, but there is a resident with the hand up on Zoom.
Okay.
See if I can.
See if we can.
Her name is Katie Begandi, I believe.
Or Burgandy.
Begandi, thank you. And I just. Katie can speak now if she would like to ask her question. Hold on a second, she's muted. Let's see. Katie, are you going to ask a question? Apparently, she either can't hear me or is not going to ask a question.
Is that her on the right side, that black one, next to Brian Barrett?
There you go.
You coming on?
Yeah, she's not muted, and I don't hear her, so.
I hear her faintly. Seriously, very faint.
It's the fan.
I think that is.
No, I wasn't a fan. I wasn't that either. I don't have a heart.
If she is able to get in.
Yeah, we'll get her in as soon as we can.
Okay.
Actually, she's no longer on the call.
Okay. And there's nobody else with their hand raised on the Zoom?
That's correct. I don't
Okay.
see any.
The age of pandemic 2020 meetings. Since this is the only comment, as hopefully Mr. Prosak see, if he's watching on the cable channel or on the Zoom, that we have a subcommittee. We are looking at alternatives. We haven't made any decisions, and you heard what Commissioner Hart, Commissioner Oliva, and Commissioner Quinn just talked about. We're looking at options as we go, and we'll continue to look at options, what we can do. So I appreciate it, well thought out, well-written letter, and it's always good to get this type of feedback from any resident. We don't view it as negative, we view it as a positive. Informed and citizens that want to get involved are a good thing for this township. So thank you, Mr. Prosak, and anybody, I think everybody got a copy of this letter. If anybody wants to reach out to Mr. Prosak individually, feel free to do so. Next item is the township manager's update. Mr. Berman, you have any?
Wednesday is Veterans Day, where we thank all of our veterans who have served this country. And because Wednesday is Veterans Day, we're going to have a double pickup tomorrow for trash. So the folks who have trash collected on Wednesday should put their trash out tonight. That'll be collected tomorrow along with all of the Tuesday trash. We're currently on schedule with our leaf collection. We remind residents not to put their leaves in the street, put them curbside. Leaves in the street when it rains tend to clog drains and cause flooding and ponding, and they're also, they make for slippery roads. Thank you to Amy Cuthbertson. Last weekend, she ran our e-recycling event, and we had 150 residents take advantage of the drop-off. And we are planning to do the same thing next year and hopefully double that. And finally, we remind folks to, even though we've had a lot of good news today in particular about a vaccine or a potential vaccine for COVID-19, we remind our residents to continue to be diligent about wearing masks and social distancing and all of the other hygiene recommendations. Currently, we have 6 employees who are isolating, none of which have been tested positive for COVID-19, but they are isolating, and that has an impact on the work that we can do for the residents, and we want those employees to hopefully come through and be healthy in the end, and we ask our residents to please do the same. And that's all I have, unless there are any questions.
Thank you very much. At this time, I'd like to entertain that we have a motion to move item 21, the Stadium Award, up to this time, since we have the architects on the call, rather than have them wait around until item 21. If someone would make that motion, I would appreciate that.
So,
Second. Second, all in favor?
aye.
Aye, so item 21, who's the Parks? Mr. Oliva?
Motion to award the stadium outdoor improvements contract to BreezeCon LLC, Russia, in the amount bidding the lowest responsible bid or reject all.
So we need, we need a motion one way or the other, and in addition, the folks who are on Zoom are unable to hear you clearly.
Okay.
Motion to award the stadium outdoor improvements contract to BreezeCon LLC, King of Prussia, in the amount of $260,815, submitting the lowest responsible bid.
Motion made. Second. Seconded by Commissioner Lewis. Discussion, questions for the,
If I could just make one comment, Mr. Corman and Mr. Gauman are on the call, and they wanted to address some of the concerns that the board members had regarding some due diligence. They did some referral checking as well as spoke with the low bidder. There is a clerical error that needs to be clarified. They want to address that, and a scheduling option. So I'm going to turn it over to the commissioners to ask questions. And Jack and Chris, if you could update the commissioners on what you have found in the interim since the last time we met?
Sure, thank you. Jack was able to contact several of the references, and he'll fill you in a minute. But they seem to have a general good opinion of the contractor. We spoke to them today related to keeping their number the way it was from the original bid. They said they would. And also they said that they would keep their bid until spring if you decide to postpone construction till then. So, Jack, you want to fill them in on the other information?
Sure. We had reached out to several of the projects that they had given us a reference to, and all the recommendations, spoke to them personally, about 6 of the projects that they mentioned, and all responses were very positive, very favorable about BreezeCon, the contractor.
what were some of the comments about their work? I'd be curious. Recommendation, great, but what were some of the
We asked
comments?
if the work had been completed on time, if there were any unusual change orders, or if there were any overt issues with quality. And some of the comments were happy to have them back to do work for us again. That was from Kurt Kitchline for the Bethlehem Housing Authority parking lot project. He had gone on to say that there were no change orders. The first of 3 parking lots that have been completed was done on time. Contractor always showed up for work. Another project, Nick Conti from the Douglas Village project in Pottstown, had high praise and said that his work was very, very good. Same person, Nick Conti, had talked about another project, Evansburg Crossing in Collegeville, said that he would use them again, use BreezeCon again on other projects. Mike Dvorak had called back. That was Edro Manufacturing Facility in Conshohocken. And again, he had positive comments about BreezeCon. So that's a brief summary of some of the responses.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Any other questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you for your help out there. You'll have to keep me straight. The next item is now item 10, the approval of minutes.
Just a point of clarification on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The stadium is not in recreation, it's its own entity, that's why.
Okay, thank you.
Just reading it.
Okay, so item 10 is the approval of minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of October 13th, 2020.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any corrections, deletions, changes? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item number 11, now the approval of warrants.
Mr. President, I move we approve the following warrant, number 11, 2020, totaling $2,802,016.34, comprising the general and sewer fund payroll for October 15th, 2020 in the amount of $629,385.96, general and sewer fund payroll for October 29, 2020 in the amount of $618,052.84, general fund disbursements number 11 of 2020 in the amount of $754,288.34, sewer fund disbursement number 11, 2020 in the amount of $602,755.15, community development block grant fund disbursement number 11 of 2020 in the amount of $67,648.58, capital projects fund disbursement number 11 of 2020 in the amount of $115,011.30, Pennsylvania Office of Unemployment Benefits in the amount of $465.30, and a credit card statement ending in the amount, ending, assume, 10/31/2020. Am I correct, Ms. Cuthbertson? Unless I'm corrected, ending at the end of last month in the amount of $14,408.87.
Second?
Motion made and seconded.
Our auditor has been through these warrants. Any questions that his review has raised have been answered to his satisfaction, and I recommend they be approved.
Thank you. Any other questions? Please call the roll, Mr. Byrne.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 12, Police Department.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between Haverford Township and FOP Lodge 27 for contract terms effective January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2023.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to motion to accept the resignation of Officer Gilman and approve the separation agreement between Officer Gilman and the township.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 13 is a second reading of a traffic ordinance.
Mr. President,
Mr. Oliva.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the second reading of ordinance number P 2020, authorizing rescinding the traffic restrictions on the following highways. Rescind special purpose parking in front of 408 Steel Road, in Leadham Road in front of 1300 Leadham Road, Tenby Road at 10 Tenby Road, Oakford Road in front of 2940 Oakford Road.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 14 is the second reading for the Fair Housing Accommodations Ordinance.
Mr. President,
Mr. Siegel.
motion to adopt the second reading of ordinance number P 23-2020, establishing a new chapter that is to provide policy and procedures for reasonable accommodation requests under the Fair Housing Act to eliminate barriers to housing opportunities within the township.
Second?
Motion made and seconded by Commissioner Oliva. Any questions? Second reading. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 15, ordinance P 24-2020, change in the Shade Tree Commission term. First reading.
A motion to adopt the first reading of ordinance number P 24-2020, authorizing a term change from 3 years to, from 5 years to 3 years.
Second?
Motion made and
To-
second.
This was something that the Shade Tree Commission members requested, shorter terms.
Safe sentence.
Yes. I was just thinking the same thing, they're getting out of a life sentence of 5 years, right? Any other questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 16, the traffic first reading.
Mr. President,
Mr. Oliva.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the first reading of ordinance number P 25-2020, amending traffic restrictions on the following highways. Parking of all vehicles prohibited at all times on Pinzon Avenue, to amend to read Pinzon Avenue East from Westchester Pike to Columbus Avenue, and special purpose parking in front of 2228 Ridmore Avenue.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Dr. Hart. Any questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 17 is Resolution 2191-2020.
Mr. President.
Mr. Holmes.
Mr. President, I move we adopt resolution number 2191 of 2020, requesting a multimodal transportation fund grant in the amount of $1 million from the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation to be used for the reconfiguration of the intersection located at Beaumont Road and Glendale Road to improve the safety of the intersection and facilitate access to the Darby Creek Trail, and hereby designates David R. Berman, Township Manager and Secretary, to execute all documents and agreements between the Township and the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation.
Second?
Motion made and seconded. Any questions on this? This was an outgrowth of a meeting the township manager, myself, the chief of police, township engineers had with 4 or 5 PennDOT transportation engineers to improve that intersection. As many are probably aware, it's a kind of a heavy near-miss accident intersection involving the 3-way interface, 2 ways, which no stopping, on right turn only, which no one knows. So PennDOT looked and realized that it needs to be what we refer to as teed up or made into a T intersection with a stop, probably with a stop sign for each direction, improving the safety of that and the sight line visibility of people coming around the bend. So please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 18,
Mr. President,
Mr. Oliva.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2192, 2020, authorizing David R. Berman to execute all documents pertaining to PA. Traffic signal application for the intersections at Lansdowne Avenue, Darby Road, Westchester Pike, and Township Line.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Questions?
Yeah,
I got one. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I keep bringing this up every meeting and every executive session. Is this the same thing as what's going on now? What's changing? I mean,
I have the same, and our township engineers representative is here. We did a huge project, what we call that Devil's Triangle, a couple of years ago before Lori left.
exactly.
It improved dramatically, and now, are we redoing or improving? What are we doing?
You guys are not doing anything. Upper Darby is doing something. This work is from Westchester Pike down to Marshall Avenue. They're doing safety improvements. It was a similar PennDOT multimodal grant that they got, I guess, a couple years ago. And what's happening at that intersection, you guys own that signal, but it's part of the project. They're updating all the infrastructure in there. So signals, mast arms, they're doing ADA ramps, crossings, everything through there. Doesn't change the configuration of the intersection, doesn't change how it operates. The only reason you're signing off on it because you own that signal.
This is not going to affect or use the same company that's working on Westchester Pike, does it? Because if it is, I'm going to vote no.
I don't know that, Commissioner.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it is, I'm voting no too, so we need to know that.
It is a
Disaster, what's going on in Westchester.
And this is a
Pike.
PennDOT authorization.
It's a PennDOT project. They bid it, they administer it.
Okay, but if it's the same company, I vote no, so I need to know. Is he just saying it's PennDOT that grabbed the company?
No,
No, it's
we're
publicly
authorizing
bid.
an application to PennDOT. That's all we're doing.
What happens if we say no?
Well, I mean, we're screwing Upper Darby if we say no for no
I'm not
reason.
trying to do that. I think, I'm not trying to do that. I know that the first, the fourth, and the second are being affected by what's going on now. It's a disaster.
Sucks for 6 too. We go there everyone.
Oh, yeah, the shopping center's in mine. It's right there, so.
Yeah, no, this triangle, when they opened that shopping center, that was a godsend, what they did with that.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
Traffic lights there, that worked great, and it still continues to work. It's further up the pike where all the traffic lights, we were talking about on Naylor's Run, those two traffic lights being timed together. They were timed together for a little while. Now it's back to the same thing where the one traffic light is you can't see the second traffic light as you're coming down the pike, and by the time you see it, you're on top of the traffic light and you're hitting the car behind you, in front of you, excuse me. And or hitting the car that's crossing Naylor's Run. I know that they were timed, John, they were timed, both together. Now both of them are off. Country Club Lane, the traffic light takes, the Dunkin' Donuts and Country Club Lane, that traffic light takes forever, and there's no traffic coming out of Country Club Lane at all. So, that's my 2 cents there.
Commissioner, I realize your frustration, and I've seen a lot of correspondence over the past couple of weeks, and I think the police have been involved and everybody, and everybody's working on it. Unfortunately, it may take a little bit of time.
This has nothing to do with it.
This has nothing to do with it, you're correct.
Okay.
Any other question? Please call the roll.
Well, I hope this doesn't, because I am going to be one upset. I'm sure you guys will be. No, yes. Okay.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yeah.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yeah.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 19, Resolution 2193.
Motion to adopt resolution number 2193, 2020, authorizing Haverford Township hereby requesting a construction grant in the amount of $300,000 from Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission to be used for construction of the southern end of Darby Creek Trail, and be it further resolved that the Board of Commissioners does hereby designate Brian Barrett, Director of Parks and Recreation Department, as the official to execute all documents and agreements between the township and the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission to facilitate and assist in obtaining the requested grant.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is this normal that we have a director instead of the manager and secretary signed for the township? Just different than most contracts we sign.
It could be either way. Occasionally, the finance director will be authorized as well.
Right, as the assistant township manager.
Yeah, that's, it's the preference of the Board of Commissioners. It's a one-time authorization.
If everybody's okay with it, I guess I'm fine, but.
Make Brian Barrett all powerful for one contract, Brian.
Well, but Bill raises a fair question. Is that never what we do?
I don't know. I can only tell you in my experience here, it hasn't been that way, but I don't know that it's never happened, if you will.
I mean, it's kind of a nit, but it makes sense. You are the township secretary, so it makes sense that you would sign on behalf of the township for us.
I don't think it's anybody's going to be hurt if you say, let's just make it the township manager instead of the
Yeah, I mean, it just,
Department of Recreation.
But there's no legal requirement that be.
right, yeah.
So why don't we just leave it the way it is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine either way. It just looked out of the ordinary to me, that's all. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
No.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 20 is Resolution 2194, National Standardized Police Training.
Chairman, thank you. Just a quick comment. I want to thank the police committee. We met last week. The police committee consists of Kevin McCluskey, myself, Connor Quinn, Commissioner Hart, Chief Oyola, and Deputy Chief Hagan. And in light of the recent events surrounding the manner in which police officers all over the country respond to calls for assistance, it has become apparent that national standard police training must ensue in connection with education, officer safety and wellness, community policing, and most importantly, de-escalation training and procedures. With so few mental health institutions available for so many individuals who need treatment, along with the ongoing drug crisis, this country must commit itself to ensuring that we, as a society, are providing our police officers with the tools necessary for not only their safety, but the safety of all of our citizens. The time is upon us to act quickly, or we will face additional conflict and the potential for further loss of life. Now, that's my comment. I also want to say that we are not, and I think the police committee will agree, we're not passing judgment on what had occurred, obviously, in Philadelphia. That hasn't been resolved yet, but we are saying that this change, especially with, I believe, with the new president coming on, President-elect Biden, and possibly a new Congress, that this country needs to have that discussion now and start acting quickly.
Thank you, Mr. D'Amelio. Did we get a second on this?
Second.
Well, you have to read the motion first.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't read it. I apologize. Okay, I lost my place here. Where are we?
Item, looks like 19 on your thing, but
I
it's
have it,
actually
yes.
20. Yeah.
Motion to adopt resolution number 2194, 2020, that the Board of Commissioners desire to state their support for the enactment of national standardized police training and request the United States Congress to review the current law and pass a bill that provides for standardized training for police.
Second.
Yeah,
Motion
I
made.
agree with you 100%. You know, some of these, as we saw in the Philadelphia issue, standardized training and giving the police the tools that they need with the stun guns and things like that is very important. So, Steve, 100% behind.
Steve and I agree too. I think it's time we take a look at all this, and I think that this is a good start. So, thank you.
De-escalation of some of these some of these issues is very important.
Well, especially as I stated, there's so few mental health facilities anymore, and there's a lot of people with mental illness out on the streets. And you know what? We need to figure out a way to deal with that. We just can't ignore that that's happening. I mean, I hear judges say all the time they have people in jail that don't belong in jail. They belong in mental hospitals. But they're out in the street and things happen, and then next thing you know, there's confrontation. And the police, at times, are not trained properly or have the tools to deal with it. I just want to make a comment. There's on the third paragraph where it says in the resolution itself, to ensure that police departments across the county, it should be country, are equipped with uniform education, training, and expertise. Is that a major problem, change, or just, it says county, but I
Doesn't
want
matter,
to.
we only
it's a
have to
typo.
do this once.
Country.
The resolution is not an ordinance, so it's,
Okay.
okay. And I agree. I think training, I don't think every police officer, there's never too much training. I think training assists in a job that's very difficult, where a young man or woman that's on the street has literally microseconds to make and execute a decision. I think so. Having training kick in almost instantaneously when they have just split seconds to make a decision on the use of force is not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing, and if we can equip those persons to be ready at any time, I think any amount of training is worth it. So, thank you.
Commissioner D'Amelio, I would ask, I'm looking at the resolution. I had originally had concerns about this resolution, specifically at how it was described in the agenda. It capitalizes National Standardized Police Training. That is a bill, but it is a bill that's just in its infancy, and we don't know what that bill contains. And like anything passed by Congress, there's an old expression, a camel is a horse built by committee. I didn't want us to support the enactment of a specific law that has not yet actually been written and hashed out. But I'm reading the resolution, and it's not as specific as simply the title is here in this agenda. So I'm not as concerned about that anymore. I do have a concern of one paragraph in the resolution. It's the second to last whereas paragraph, Commissioner D'Amelio. It says, whereas the township deems it necessary to restore the principles of constitutional policing that simultaneously promoted effective crime reduction strategies while optimizing transparency and accountability. I'm not exactly sure what we mean by that, but putting in the concept of constitutional policing, I think it complicates this, because we have our Constitution, we have the courts determine what police powers they do have and they don't have, and frankly, that's not at the congressional level. That is at our constitutional level. So I would just ask that you strike that paragraph. I don't think it takes away from anything else that we want to do here. It just seems to be a statement, and I'm not sure where it came from. It may come from another township that passed a similar resolution, but it just has some hot button terms that I just don't think are necessary for us to accomplish what we want to accomplish. So I support the resolution and the idea of it, certainly, but I would ask that we strike the penultimate whereas provision.
You want to take that whole section out?
I do. I mean, if we want to say the township hopes to promote effective crime reduction strategies and optimize transparency and accountability, I'm okay with that. I just don't like
fine. Let's do that.
restoring the principles of constitutional policing. That's a real loaded term.
Okay, I don't know how loaded it is, but I'll give that to you. That's fine.
Defer to me.
Okay.
I will. I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'll give it to you.
So you amended the motion with those changes? And Mr. Oliva, you second that? Is it-
Yeah,
Okay, great, thank you.
May I?
Thank you.
Mr. Siegel?
Yeah, in that paragraph that Commissioner Holmes talked about, I don't know that constitutional policing is what was meant there as opposed to community policing. When you read it with community policing, it makes sense, and constitutional policing is actually a concept that the Justice Department uses and others do. Community policing is talking about addressing exactly what everyone's talking about. So my
Much easier.
suggestion is that it be constitutional, be replaced with community.
Okay, you win. I'm okay with that.
I'm all right with it. Fine.
Okay with that too?
Yeah.
That sounds,
All those involved, okay, Mr. D'Amelio, and a seconder, okay. Great. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 21, Resolution 2195, 2020. Mr. Siegel.
President,
Yeah, go ahead.
motion to adopt resolution number 2195, 2020, establishing ethical standards and financial disclosure.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Commissioner McCluskey.
If
Discussion.
I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is the same resolution, or it was drafted as an ordinance that we discussed previously, with one significant exception. Most of the discussion focused on what was then section 7, which addressed who would determine if there were disputes, etc. And it really did leave a lot of potential for creating more problems than solving. So what I did in this version is eliminate that section. That's what we discussed with, do we contact the solicitor, et cetera, et cetera. And section 1, I just split up into 3 paragraphs because it was just a jumble of text. But so just so everyone knows, it is the same except for the elimination of the section 7 that raised significant questions among the board.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I just have a
Mr. Lewis.
question about
Go ahead.
Section 5, conflict of interest. It says no commissioner or other official or employee shall engage in a business or transaction or shall have any interest which would impair his independence, should be his or her, I guess, independence of judgment or action in the performance of his or her official duties. So let me give you an example of where I think someone's independence would be impaired. When I was first elected to this board in 2004, I actually ran against a commissioner that was being flown back and forth from Florida and being told how to vote. Now, that's, to me, a quid pro quo, and that's clearly a situation where someone's independence is impaired. So is it the sense of this board, or the purpose of this particular paragraph, is that there would have to be some quid pro quo for there to be someone's independence to be impaired. So for example, if I were to do, say, provide a service to a fellow commissioner, whatever service it might be, and I did it at cost, or I did it less than cost, or I charged them more than my cost, the commissioner receiving that service or that benefit, would he or she be, would his or her independence be, or judgment be impaired to the point where they couldn't perform their official duties? My answer to my own question would be no. I'd like to hear what everybody else thinks.
I would tend to agree with your interpretation that in a business relationship that's not, your first example, taking a flight, which is a personal gift, and something extra upon there is not a normal business relationship that we would all be in. So I run a business for 37 years, and by the nature of normal working, if you're working together, whether you're in the financial, telecommunications, or medical or legal, providing legal advice, if I got legal advice from Mr. Holmes, God forbid, that I would, would that put me in a compromising position? Or if I got medical advice from Dr. Hart, is that a quid pro quo? I don't think so. I think him giving me a prescription for antibiotic for something is not in the reach of compromising my vote or him compromising there. So I think you've answered your question, at least in my mind.
Yeah, okay.
Correctly, but that's.
President Wexler, if
that's-
I gave
that
you
was-
legal advice for free, you'd overpay for it, so.
I get what it was worth, I'm sure.
That was my concern. The threshold in which you say that. I mean, for me, if, again, I got Bill, you put telephones in my office or something, you've been running a business for 37 years, you charge me to do the work, I'm gonna want you to do the work, and then is that a conflict of interest? Of course not, it's not a.
What if I buy you guys all eggs? Would that be a conflict of interest?
Right, if I go to
Actually,
meet at
if
Connor's.
I could
Actually, yes.
answer, this really isn't, this isn't aimed at relationships among and between commissioners.
Right.
This is about having business or interests in the township where your own financial or some other well-being depends on you doing something that is in abrogation to your duties to the township. Look, I mean, 9 of us commissioners over our lifetimes, our different roles as commissioners are going to have alliances with other commissioners. We're going to do things together. People are going to say, why, Larry, why'd you vote with McCluskey that time? And it's not going to be because I'm beholden to him or I've lost my independence. It just may be part of the legislative, conversation that goes on and the analysis that goes on as we try to build alliances and build, consensus to get something done. We're talking in 5A about somebody who has a business transaction or some interest in something that's more important to them than their duty to do the right thing for the township. I just don't think there's
As long as there's no quid pro quo.
What's that?
As long as there's no quid pro quo.
Yeah, I'm not the lawyer, but if you profit from it, it's probably not correct. But if I don't profit from it, or
No, if you don't control their
Yeah, I mean,
vote.
you don't control it, or it doesn't,
nobody
it doesn't
does.
compromise your
If you don't control their vote.
If I owned a business in town and was a commissioner here, and something came, one of our ordinances that came up, or an issue came up before the township that would have a direct impact on my business, it would be my duty to declare that conflict and to step out of that conversation, and that just 8 commissioners would have that. Would be dealing with that issue. And if I didn't step out of that, or if I hid from everybody the interest that I had in that, and it was disclosed later, I could be rightly accused of not disclosing a conflict of interest and not and voting in my own interest as opposed to doing my duty as a commissioner. There doesn't have to be a quid pro quo, but there has to be some benefit to the person that is driving that commissioner to make their decision, not what's right for the township.
So as long as the individual commissioner is making their own judgment as to what is best, what they view as best for the township.
Right,
There's
and
no
provided
lack
there
of
isn't
independence.
some outside, that they are not involved in a transaction that would have, just by its nature, such an impact, such an obvious impact on their ability to make that decision, someone could rightly question whether they could be independently evaluating the pros and the cons of township movement. If the township were going to build, we're going to choose between 2 properties to buy, let's say, and build something on them, and a commissioner didn't disclose that they had an interest in one of those properties, I mean, that's a classic example of where you'd have a conflict of interest. It wouldn't even matter if 8 other people voted yes for that, and I said, yeah, let's buy property X. If I had an interest in property X and I didn't disclose it, and voted yes, and tried to influence other people to vote for yes, I'd be obviously violating the thing here. Again, I don't see this as something that involves commissioners with regard to commissioners. This involves transactions or business interests or anything that are outside of what we do here outside of what we do on this board, and does the existence of it and our involvement in it keep us from exercising the judgment we're expected to exercise as commissioners?
As long as their vote is independent and not controlled by virtue of a relationship.
Right. I mean, that's how I view
Fine,
it.
that's good. I'm fine with it.
And then the other, B is then specific examples, which are good to have. But As I said the last time we talked about this, the whole point of this is to A, establish some policies we want to live by, and then show some examples that make it easier to understand them. But this doesn't enumerate everything we're supposed to do. It also doesn't restrict us in everything we're supposed to do. That's a group of guidelines that we should live by, and more important, that the public has the right to expect. And so that's why I think this is a great idea, because it never hurts to enumerate these things. I think these are all obvious examples, but obvious examples because I've been doing this for a long time and I'm an attorney, but not so obvious for other folks. And it's good for them to read and good for them to see and good for us as a board to review every once in a while and adopt.
Like if we were going to say, I'll give a conflict, the so-called that I would have, if we were to make it a rule that we could have outside dining on all of the streets and stuff, I would have to recuse myself from that because I would benefit from that in a way, right? Would that be?
I mean, that's a fair, I don't want to be in the position of advising you on something like that. But that's a very good analysis for you to go through. You have a direct financial interest in whether or not we should have outside dining because you would have a financial interest in that. And it would be smart for you to get the advice of our solicitor or anyone else as to whether or not you should participate in that. The standard you'd want to live by is that if any reasonable person even thought you had some kind of conflict, that's the thing to step out of.
Yeah.
But you can also walk the public through the analysis. Look, a couple years ago, I got accused, it was a long time ago now, I got accused of having a conflict of interest because my firm represented Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Independence Blue Cross and Blue Shield in some, some transaction somewhere. And we were considering joining a consortium. We, the township, were considering joining a consortium that was going to give us more strength in negotiating our premiums with IBC than we could just as a small township. Instead, we were joining like 47 other municipalities. And somebody gets up and comes at me and comes at another member of this board associated with Independence Blue Cross and accuses us of conflicts of interest. Well, not only was it not a conflict of interest, I was taking a position directly adverse to IBC because I was putting us in a position of being stronger, being in a stronger position to negotiate those things. So someone may raise the conflict. It's still your duty to always vote and always act like a commissioner when you can. And you shouldn't just bail out of a situation because somebody has raised the specter of a conflict and it turns out there's not a conflict at all. So I would always analyze it and consider it and get advice before you just walk out in the instance of a conflict. But a very easy conflict that I just simply would have to get out of would be, we did have a vote about a matter, somebody trying to develop a property over in Mario's area. That entity was a client of my firm's. There was just simply no question. I couldn't touch that. I didn't participate in the conversations. I stepped out of it the first time it appeared on the agenda, and that's a no-brainer for an attorney dealing with clients in the firm. So in some situations, it's just simple, clear, black and white, get out. But you want to analyze it because you don't want to just willy-nilly step out of anything that has to do with restaurants or anything that has to do with dining just because you own a restaurant.
I think the point's been made. So, any other questions?
Well, does Dan agree? He's the author of it. Dan, are you still there?
I'm still here, yeah.
Yeah, your comments?
No, I think we've discussed it. All I'll say is, I spend a lot of time dealing with legal ethics. I chair the Pennsylvania Bar's Legal Ethics Committee. And today I was doing a whole program on conflict of interest. And so much of it is subjective and, you have to, if you're not sure, you ask advice, but generally, we all can sense when it's not appropriate. I've recused myself when clients, come before the board where there's a vote to award them a contract or something. So I think the way Larry stated it was fine, but it's, it's subjective. You'll know the difference. We've all been accused of oh, you can't vote on taxes because, you pay taxes. Yes, we pay the same taxes though as everyone else, and our vote doesn't give us a preference. That's one that isn't a conflict. If you're voting on something with regard to a property you own specifically, that obviously is. And then it's everywhere in between.
Okay.
Is that clear enough?
Yeah, I think when in doubt, make a disclosure, that's all.
No, it's just.
Mr. Berman, would you please call the roll?
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 22 is contract awards. We've already done the stadium outdoor improvements, Parks and Recreation Department.
Well, it's not going to be me because they're everywhere except anywhere in the 6th Ward, so who's got it?
Mr. Oliva, I believe.
Okay, motion to authorize the Parks and Recreation Department to purchase 20 benches for the various parks throughout the township. Benches will be installed at Veterans Park, Lanark Park, Richland Farms, Burwood Park, Westgate Park, Grange Park, Bailey Park, and the assorted others from Recreational Resources USA, Kenneth Square, under CoStar's contract 1474 in the amount of $15,294.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Mr. Holmes, who's not getting a bench.
I don't know, I might be one of them.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Are these replacing benches or these are brand new?
These are,
They are, we're replacing some benches. If benches are in disrepair, we're replacing some of them. We won't be replacing every bench at every park, but we will be putting new benches around.
Is it a capital project?
Yes, this was part of our capital plan.
Larry Holmes getting the bench?
I don't think I heard that question.
Right, this is like $1 billion.
Larry Holmes would like to have a bench somewhere in his ward.
Okay, would you like to name Holmes on the bench?
That's all right for now.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Don't get him talking again.
Carve it in with a penknife.
Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I was muted. I'm sorry. Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Grange Estate.
Motion to award the heater replacement contract at the Grange Estate, the Mansion House, to Hirschberg, Mechanical in Willow Grove, or a PA, in the amount of $30,000 or $325 base bid, and number one bid submitted the lowest responsible bid.
Motion made and seconded, rapid fire. I think I heard Dr. Hart first. Any questions on this? Need a repair down there? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 23, agreement, Public Works Department.
Motion to approve independent contractor agreement with PAR Recycle Works, Philadelphia, PA, for services related to seasonal leaf collection.
Second.
Motion made and seconded by Commissioner D'Amelio. Any questions on this? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 24 is continuation of the citizen forum. Mr. Berman, is there anybody on the Zoom conference that's raising their hand or wishing to speak?
Yeah, we're going to try Katie Bigandy again. And we'll give her a second.
Hi,
Hello.
Oh,
can
good.
you hear me?
There you
Yes,
are.
we can.
Okay, great. Sorry about the issue earlier. I had actually submitted a public comment, but I suppose you didn't receive it
I don't have a record of one.
earlier today?
I'm sorry. If you
Okay.
did submit it, I didn't get it.
Okay. So maybe I'll just summarize, because I had two points. One was regarding the Brookline School, which is why I raised my hand earlier, and just a question for the group. I know you had done a survey earlier this year seeking resident feedback on what sort of services or needs we had in the community, and I'm just curious if anyone had tied those survey results to potential uses of space for the Brookline property.
Katie, yes, we did. When we met, we looked at the responses, the needs. And I did get your email and your recommendations, and they're all good points. I think one of the things in looking at that is we just did, as we went through the presentation, financially, we didn't think that the township was going to be able to provide the fund. That was a significant cost to the township. And to do some of the things that you suggested, would have to be township run.
Right, yeah, and I'm curious though, it sounded like there was a discussion about maybe demolishing the building, but that wasn't necessarily considered, if I was tracking and following the conversation, because it is kind of hard to hear everyone who speaks, who's not on Zoom, but I think I heard that the three options presented tonight were to preserve the building, not to demolish the building. Is that correct?
That's right, they were alternatives to demolishing.
And then a next step would be for you to also follow through, and if you were to demolish the building, does that change the financials? And I'm not even tied to necessarily the idea I submitted, but more going back to kind of the needs expressed by the community in terms of what were the most important things that came out of that survey, whether it was more playground space or community space or potentially housing. I'm just so curious to hear how those needs would rank against the use of that space, whether it's demolished or preserved.
Yeah, I think, one of the issues is with the comprehensive plan, we were only, we didn't get very far. So the only things that we were looking at were responses that people had responded to an email. We were planning on, and continue to plan at some point, of having open meetings to get more community feedback. So, we were trying to look at what was realistic alternatives to preserving the building. And the committee was formed at a point where we were going to vote on demolishing the building. So this was essentially us looking at a ways, how could we preserve the building and make it a community resource in a financially viable manner.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, well, I don't know what the exact next step is, but just from my point of view as a resident, I mean, I care less about preserving the building. I do love history, and I know others feel differently, but it seems like it would be something that would be great to get community input in, because real estate is, in my opinion, hard to come by here, and if there were plans that residents had expressed interest in from the survey, and there was a way to kind of marry that need of the community up with the available real estate, I would personally be interested in kind of pursuing and seeing the outcome of any thought you could put behind that.
Katie, could you provide for the record your address?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Could we get your address for the record in the?
Yeah, sure. 201 Mill Road.
Okay.
19083.
Okay. It'll just go in the minutes, that's all.
So can I move over to the other comment that I had submitted prior?
Sure.
Okay, so it's irrelevant at this point, but I had submitted a comment on behalf of myself, and there were 18 other residents who had signed on. And it was just more, there was a couple points we made. First was the impetus for reaching out was the upcoming vote. Well, it was upcoming. The vote that you took already on the FOP contract. And the one point, which is still globally relevant, is just in terms of publishing the agenda. I had heard kind of third hand that the contract vote was happening today, and went on the website looking for the agenda. But as of 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. when I submitted or was writing my comment, there still wasn't an agenda. So I would say one global comment is just, if there's any way you can publish agendas with more advance warning, for those of us who have kids in virtual school and we're trying to work and trying to balance a lot of stuff, it's really hard at the last minute to fit a meeting in, but we are trying very hard to be engaged community members and participate in these meetings when we can. So that's one comment. The second comment, we were requesting tabling the vote just because, and someone else made the point very eloquently, and I fully agree. You know, policing is something that is vital to our community. By no means am I a person who seeks to vilify members of law enforcement. They're a vital member of the community, and we all want to be working together. I think with all of the recent attention that policing and police policy gets, my one comment was going to be that a 3-year contract seems like a really long contract, given that, you know, policing is at the forefront of national, county, you name it, discussions. And so it'll be interesting to see what sorts of innovations come out of training, personnel records, right? Like how do we make sure our police officers have the resources that they need, and that we in the community also feel equally protected. And so it was just, a comment was really going to be asking to table the vote so that the community could have input, or that you could consider a shorter term, or make sure you have some sort of out clause or renegotiation clause, because it just feels like policing is the community topic that's happening right now. And that was the main crux of the comment, but unfortunately it's irrelevant at this point.
Okay, I mean, and you're aware that the vote is not so much on how we police, but it's a collective bargaining agreement that deals mostly with salaries, benefits, and vacation things, and things along those lines, part of the collective bargaining agreement with the union that the members belong to. Next year we'll be doing it with our non-uniformed employees as well.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my one question in terms of the contract, because I don't have any visibility into what clauses are and are not in the contract, but would things like personnel incidents be in there? And I realize this is a very fine line to have to walk, right? As an employee myself, like my personnel records are mine and for my employer to deal with. And yet what I see in the national headlines is often when we see these tragic incidents happening, they sometimes involve officers that have had prior records. And so just making sure that if there are protocols in the contract that govern how an officer could be, and I don't want to use the word discipline to sound harsh, but, you know, given the resources he or she needs to correct behaviors or receive additional training if they are involved in some sort of incident, so that we don't see someone who then has 7 prior incidents and then unfortunately it never gets addressed properly and it turns into some tragic situation for both the officer and, you know, the victim. So I think that's more my concern when I hear of FOP contracts. I assume that there's some sort of clause in there that would govern how the Haverford Township Police Department is or is not able to discipline and further train their employees.
I'll try to alleviate your concerns. Standing at our podium is the chief of police. I'm going to let him address some of your concerns right now.
Great.
So Katie, I understand what you're saying. Besides the collective bargaining agreement, which, like the Commissioner Wexler said, which covers the salaries and benefits, we have our own rules and regulations. So we have recently become accredited through the state. We have 137 rules and regulations which govern how an officer operates on or off duty. If an officer gets himself in trouble off duty, we're aware of it, and we have specific rules and regulations to address that. If something happens on duty, we also specifically have recommendations and rules that qualify, and there's discipline and levels of discipline involved in that. If we go one step beyond that, we're in our hiring practices, what you alluded to, as far as somebody trying to get a job here in Haverford Township who may have issues in the past, we would be aware of that. If an officer gets himself in trouble in Pennsylvania and he's decertified as a police officer, he can never get a job in Pennsylvania again. Once again, if he's from out of state and applies for a job in Pennsylvania, we're in Haverford Township, we do extensive background checks, and we would find out if there was any issues in his past. I hope that answers your question.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're
And
welcome.
again, I hope you understand the spirit of my comment is really the interest of all parties, right? You know, again, I think of myself as an employee, like I would be given resources to try and correct anything that isn't going well job performance wise. And I think it's important that we recognize that the community is asking a lot of our officers, and part of the spirit of the comment too was, you know, making sure that there are any provisions in terms of training. And it sounds like you all addressed this tonight, though, that officers are really being given those resources. And someone made the point about mental health. I could not agree more. It's a crisis in our country, and certainly here it's happening everywhere. And so how do we make sure everyone's being supported, the community, the officers, everyone? So if at any point a community panel is brought to light where we can provide input, I think mental health is definitely something that should be addressed there. So it's something probably for future consideration of if there is any sort of community / law enforcement / elected official kind of collaborative advisory board that could be put together to really tackle things like mental health and training, et cetera. So that's all I'll say. Thank you so much for answering all of those questions.
You're welcome.
Chief, thank you for your comments.
Chief, could I just keep, just for the benefit of anybody else listening, could you just make clear, a 3-year contract with a collective bargaining agreement doesn't in any way confine you for the next 3 years in still considering additional training, adapting to different standards? I mean, you know, obviously modernizing police is something you constantly do, not just on the eve of or in preparation for contract negotiations.
That's correct. The contract has nothing to do with how we train our officers or if we upgrade our officers. So that really, the contract, like Commissioner Wexler had said and I said, covers the benefits and pay scale and that sort of thing. There are protection in there for the officers like anybody else who's employed that gives them the right to appeal if something happens to them, whether it be discipline, if it's a standard practice. But to answer your question, it does not change if we're moving forward to have different training. It doesn't bind us in any way.
And Chief, you just recently, our police department has just started publishing online a great deal of its, a substantial part of its operations manual.
That's correct, Commissioner. There are certain things we cannot share with the public. It's part of our deep operational plans, which give away too much information. But the majority of our regulations are all in line with on the township website.
That includes your standards, your expectations, your training.
That's correct.
And that's all available to anybody who goes on the PD
Absolutely.
website. They can find it.
Yes.
May I, Mr. President?
Yes.
Katie, this is Steve D'Amelio. I'm the Commissioner of the First Ward and Chairman of the Police Committee. This is a bipartisan committee. I was the one that introduced the resolution number 2194, 2020, and in it did discuss how few mental health institutions are available for many individuals. The Police Committee will meet with the chief on a regular basis, and we do discuss training and issues, and then we bring it before the board if there are any issues. So there is a great deal of transparency and discussion with our local police, the police chief and his staff.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Berman, are there any other members of the public?
No, sir.
Okay. New business. Is there any new business? Other business. Mr. D'Amelio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I would like to thank all of our volunteer firefighters that are still operating during this COVID pandemic, and they're doing a fantastic job. Do we know if there's any movement on 476 and Westchester Pike? Where is that? The improvements that were going to be made there? Do we have an idea?
The improvements to Westchester Pike at Route 3 is a PennDOT project, and I believe Pannoni happens to be the engineer working for PennDOT on that project. And I believe we're just close to the inception of design. I did see some folks doing some surveying work out there last week, and so we're close to the inception of design work at this point. COVID slowed everybody down.
Okay, great. And of course, I'm going to bring up Westchester Pike. We went to the moon. Does anybody realize that? We went to the moon in 1969, and we cannot fix the traffic lights along Westchester Pike. That company can't fix it, that it's affecting this entire township, specifically our wards. I mean,
Steve, you still can't put metal in a microwave, so.
yeah, right.
You know,
We can, certainly we can. Titanium, I think. But anyway, I mean, you know, this is a real issue. I asked my fellow commissioners that it's affecting. you gotta be, our constituents are looking at us like, what's going on? And you see it all over social media. They're looking at us like, how can you not be able to fix this?
And the fact is, Stephen, I hate to interrupt,
Okay.
what you're talking is that it worked.
It worked.
It was working.
Right.
You could you could come down from Westchester, from Broomall into the township and not stop at a traffic light. The whole way the traffic would move. You could make it down to the blue route without getting, without hitting every traffic light. Then all of a sudden I'm on Manoa and Westchester Pike, and I'm watching the signal for the left turn take 30 seconds with nobody there. Take 30 seconds, and traffic is backing up along Westchester Pike.
You are correct.
So, yeah, so these are, and it's constantly getting phone calls on people saying, what's going on at Naylor's Run? What's going on at Country Club? What's going on at, John, I called you the other day
You're
about
so right.
Westchester Pike. We had to have police come out.
That's correct.
Because that traffic light was short cycling on Westchester Pike, and the traffic was back down all the way down the Pike at 11 o'clock.
This is a daily occurrence. We
need our
agree
state
with you
representatives
100%.
and State senators, or somebody to get involved. I mean,
Well-
this is just, can Pannoni Associates put any pressure on it? This is
tomorrow-
ridiculous.
Right.
We are working with, through Pannoni with PennDOT. We have been
Can he come
struggling-
up, I'm sorry, can he come up to the microphone? Come up to the microphone so the public can hear him. Anything for us? He wasn't talking.
I don't want to cut Mr. Berman off if you want to finish.
Well, we've been working through Pannoni, and Pannoni happens to be here, so Chuck.
Here's Chucky.
Everybody obviously recognizes it's a severe issue, and it's really, really a detriment to the township right now. I know PennDOT has been made aware of it numerous times by every entity that's involved, including, the chief and everybody in the police. The manufacturer has been made aware of it, has been out there. The contractor has been made aware of it and has been out there numerous times. I don't know what the situation is in technical aspects of it, but it based on emails that we've seen from everybody, there's a number of issues that are going on. And the manufacturer is the lead on it, trying to resolve the issue inherently with their software and hardware that's in the system. And the secondary contact is the contractor, obviously, trying to prosecute that and make those changes.
Okay, but this we're talking about, it's gotta be a month.
Right, several months. Yeah.
I mean,
These are the
what
guys that did the
changed?
737
What
software.
actually changed? What did they do
We
to
don't.
change it?
Here-
One day was fine, the next
agree.
day, boom, they changed something. I know they went out. I saw them now.
They've been through numerous. The problem is there's three contractors involved in this. We all agree it's a disaster. I will send an email to the state tomorrow and to all the contractors involved, asking for a meeting with Pannoni Associates to get this squared away.
I would also ask, Dave, that you contact all of our state senators,
Sure.
state representative. We need help.
You're absolutely right.
This is bizarre.
Absolutely, we'll take care of it.
Ironically, I got a phone call from Rhythm Associates, who's the company that does the programming, trying to sell us equipment the other day. So
Hey, what?
they were trying to sell me equipment for more traffic lights.
Yeah, okay.
You know how far that got.
Just to be clear, we're putting as much pressure as we can on PennDOT, and we will reach out to the representatives and the state senators to try and get some help with this.
Great.
I mean, the only thing I could think of that would help alleviate it is that we have to put cops on the corner during rush hour to move traffic along, or?
We can't operate those lights.
Is it just Haverford Township, or is Marple having the same issue?
Marple only has a small section of that traffic light.
But they're having issues.
The difference in Marple is it's a different company that installed that.
Okay.
So there are only 3 or 4 lights there. They do have issues, but not the issues that we have.
Yeah, the frustrating part is that it worked. It was working for a couple of months there. Everything worked fine.
Working beautiful.
And traffic, and traffic wasn't backing up on Manoa Road. It wasn't backing up on Westchester, because when Westchester Pike starts to back up, then people start blocking the intersection of Manoa, And then Manoa Road starts backing up, and it starts backing up all the way. Manoa backs up now to Sycamore.
Manoa Road starting, it seems it starts at 3 o'clock, and for about 2.5 hours, it just becomes gridlocked over there. So
Exactly.
what's going on with the timing, I don't know, but we'll get it moving again
Right, and
tomorrow.
that was not happening.
Correct.
Sorry. but,
Thank you. Now,
you know,
any other new business in the first ward?
No, thank you.
Mr. Oliva?
Well, that's what I had. I
Okay. Mr. McCloskey?
have I have a lot of angry constituents who are, for a long time I've been telling, when this system goes in, we're going to spend all this money, we're going to get this, it's going to be good, you're going to love it and everything. And now they're yelling at me because we can't get this thing straight. So somebody's got to get this straightened out so we can move traffic.
Mr. McCloskey?
Sure, I'm going to talk about PennDOT for a second. And
Our dead horse tonight, yeah?
yeah, so actually, I'm somewhat serious. The Ardmore Avenue Bridge, I'm sure Commissioner Lewis is going to discuss it as well, but for purposes of the third ward, as everybody in that neighborhood knows, there's two cement stuccoed walls at the entrance at Ardmore Avenue and Gulfview Road. Given the new and elevation of Ardmore Avenue, after it was realized later in the project that there was going to have to be an additional raising of the bridge because of the passing by of SEPTA, Gulfview Road would come in at a higher elevation than where those two walls were. And one of the walls would probably lose about half of its existing material. A lot of ideas were considered, but ultimately we indicated that if there was going to be damage to one, and one was going to be essentially buried underneath in terms of the aesthetic views of it, that we asked that to be solved. And we think we've come up with an arrangement to whereby they will both be replaced and move farther down Gulfview Road in their original size, dimension, shape, material, and design with the aesthetic features that are on each wall. So the walls will be taken down and probably replaced in the spring. So if you drive by and you see the walls that are not there, please do not be alarmed that they will no longer exist. They will be back and better than ever in the spring. And we're hoping that once that problem has resolved, that the bridge, many have probably seen that the bridge appears to have has been paved, and we're hopeful that the bridge will open soon. That's my update on Ardmore Avenue Bridge. I'm sure Commissioner Lewis will give any further updates that he has. Just to reiterate what I said in the proclamation earlier, with COVID and everything, a lot of the small businesses in 2020 have gone through some tough times, as many of us individually have. So I just ask, if you're preparing for Thanksgiving, as you're preparing for a holiday season, if there's food or materials that you're going to purchase, to consider shopping locally first, to help our small businesses essentially stay afloat for all practical purposes. And then I just, as I've said many times over the last couple of months, just please wear your mask. And we all want to get back to some sort of normalcy. The only way we do that is to stop the disease from spreading. So please wear your mask. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Siegel?
Thank you. All I'll say is ditto about traffic on Westchester Pike. And I do look forward to the day when we won't have to meet by Zoom, and I will feel comfortable attending our meetings or any meetings again in person. I rarely go anywhere, and hope that we will get COVID under control sooner than later. I do want to touch on a serious note, and coming on the heels of the election, I'm not going to talk about the election, but it's an important day in history, and in light of current events, it's even holds more significance. On November 9th and 10th in 1938, Nazi stormtroopers led a wave of violent attacks on Jewish people and property throughout Germany and Austria, which the Nazis had annexed. During these pogroms, 91 Jews were killed, thousands were taken from their home and incarcerated in concentration camps, 267 synagogues were destroyed, and some 7,500 Jewish-owned shops were smashed and looted. The Kristallnacht pogroms presaged attempts to remove Jews from German life completely. Over the past few years, hate crimes of all types have been on the rise in this country, and we see examples of it locally and nationally. White supremacists have been emboldened, rhetoric is intensified. As we mark this date, let us act in keeping with the lessons of those dark days and nights. We have to speak out against racism, against anti-Semitism, against bigotry in all its forms, and against intolerance. We need to stand up and act against indifference and recommit ourselves to battling prejudice and persecution wherever it exists and against whomever it's aimed. That is the only way we'll not only honor the memories of those killed recently and long ago, and in events that have torn this country apart in ways I think many of us never imagined. And then we can really reaffirm the call of never again. We need to stay vigilant and move forward to deal with these problems. They won't go away if we don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Lewis.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank Commissioner McCluskey and our Township Manager Dave Berman and Joe Celia, our Director of Code Enforcement, on working through what I think is a good solution on the wall issue that Commissioner McCluskey talked about. It came out of left field, although we knew those walls weren't going to be standing at the end of the day. But I think we have a solution now that's going to work for all parties. I would only add to what Mr. McCluskey said, just in terms of some additional things that need to be done before they can open the Ardmore Avenue Bridge, and hopefully this will be, from Commissioner McCluskey and myself, our last Ardmore Avenue Bridge update. It's, if you've been over there, it looks like it's ready to be open, but there's some punch list items that still need to be done, which include railing for the handicap ramps, the guide rails approaching the bridge, and the fencing over the bridge. So a couple things, some of those items were actually ordered, but because of COVID were delayed in terms of their arrival, and obviously delayed the installation of those particular items. But from PennDOT, it looks like late November, early December reopening, let's hope. And PennDOT wanted to work out the issue involving the walls prior to opening the bridge, because they didn't want to have Golfview closed when they opened Ardmore Avenue. So they wanted some resolution of the wall issue, which has been resolved. So Golfview will reopen simultaneously with Ardmore Avenue when it is open. So, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Holmes.
Mr. President, thank you. Just folks in the 6th Ward in particular, on my side of the ward, we've been dealing with a long aqua project that's gone months too long, and the township and I are dealing with aqua to try to find out when it's going to finish. And there have been some surprise water stoppages, and there have been signs on people's lawns for months longer than we expected. And so I just want the folks in the 6th Ward to know that the township is on it, and we're trying to get that job finished as quickly as possible. And I also wanted to thank everybody on the 6th Ward for what I consider to have been a really outstanding election day. We had a lot of people voting in person, as well as thousands more voting by mail. And as much as all of us braced ourselves for what could have been an interesting election day, it was really just a beautiful day. No reports of any kind of issues, any kind of disagreements. We had hundreds of voters out in a number of our consolidated polling places, and by all reports, it was a wonderful, peaceful day. So hopefully it bodes for the transition. And with that, I just wish everybody a happy and healthy Thanksgiving, as unusual as it may be this year, or maybe it's smaller than normal, but we still have a lot to give thanks for. And And that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Quinn, I would like to, to also wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, and to thank all of the staff and the workers here that work in this township to make it run smooth. I just wish you guys all Thanksgiving, and let's get this year over. Let's get this year over with. We only have one more month left, I think. So, and then we're on to new things. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Dr. Hart.
I just have a few items. Brookline School, the asbestos removal should end tomorrow. The company will still be there for at least a few more days for some other projects, but the asbestos work will be done then. Wanted to thank Parks and Rec Department. There was an excellent presentation yesterday on recycling. It was very informative, certainly sort of food for thought of maybe where the township should be looking in the future, or we possibly should be looking at some changes in how we approach recycling. And finally, Karakung Drive. Yesterday was the last Sunday that the drive will be closed at this point. It will be closed again on Thanksgiving this year. I've heard from a lot of residents, as I think some of the other commissioners have. I know there's a petition being put together to try to close it on Sundays year-round. One of the things we do not control the road, so we can petition the PennDOT, but ultimately PennDOT's going to make that decision. So I may be back next month with a petition and try to pursue that. But at least for the time being, one more day, that's Thanksgiving. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. In the 9th Ward, November 19th is the Hilltop Civic Association meeting, which is also my public meeting. It's again a Zoom due to the COVID. And then a happy Thanksgiving, and I wish everyone a Veterans Day. My fellow veterans on November the 11th. Please take the time to thank one, and then enjoy your family time at Thanksgiving. And that's all we have. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.